I'm Christina.
And I'm Matt.
And this is New Ways Podcast. Today, our guest is a aerospace medical physician, as well as the founder of Alaska Rhodiola, Dr. Petra Illig. Thank you for being here with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you all the way here from Alaska. Mm-hmm. You came from Anchorage, right?
I came from Anchorage, long overnight flight, and it's wonderful to see the sunshine at this time of year.
Thankfully, today is a little bit sunnier. We've been having some cold patches for California lately. So on that note, let's just get right to it. You went from aerospace medicine to creating Alaska Rhodiola. How did that start? How did that go about?
Well, I think if you're open to a lot of things in life, you kind of just stumble into things. Obviously, I'm not an herbalist or a naturopath or anything like that. So it was a bit of a stretch for me to go from something as clinical and square, right, as aerospace medicine to something like a botanical product. But it happened because I was reading years ago in a science magazine, Science News to be specific, and there was this really interesting article about Rhodiola rosea as a plant that had been used by northern people. And living in Alaska, I was very interested in native herbal medicine of the north. And there was so much information about this really precious plant and its health benefits and its history throughout the ages that I became intrigued by it. And then I also learned that it grows very well in northern climates like ours. And I kind of just put two and two together, knowing that Alaskan farmers struggle a lot growing food, and they don't make much money, and they're always fighting the elements. And my idea was that perhaps by cultivating a plant that actually could take advantage of our harsh conditions, they might actually be able to make money from growing something that they didn't have to fight the elements on. Mm-hmm. And so, and then the side benefit of that, of course, was, the opportunity to produce a high-quality botanical for human health. So that just kind of is how it snowballed in my mind.
I would love to know your background in aerospace medicine, how you got there.
Oh, well, I grew up around airplanes. And so when I decided to take flying lessons that happened to occur while I was in medical school, I would not recommend going to medical school and getting your pilot's license at the same time. But that kind of helped me fuse those two concepts. However, my first half of my career, my first 15 years, was as an emergency medicine physician. So, and I kind of just did a little bit of flight medicine on the side. And then in, I think it was about 1998, thereabouts, I was hired by Delta Airlines to become one of their first company pilot doctors, advisory consultant physicians. And so I switched pretty much out of emergency medicine into aerospace medicine. It's called aerospace medicine because it's such a broad specialty, but I'm really more on the civilian side, on the aviation part, although I have some interest in the space medicine piece regarding commercial space travel and, normal people, non-professional astronauts who might want to go flying and the medical conditions that they might be facing in space. So that's always been a side interest of mine.
That is incredible. So had you done work at all? So besides Delta, did you do anything with NASA or?
No, not directly. Some friends of mine who also have expertise in various aspects of aerospace medicine, and I formed a company called Space Medicine Associates, where we were hoping to be consultants to companies or individual potential commercial space tourists to know what they needed to understand or what medical conditions they might need to work around if they were going to, spend a lot of money to go into space. You don't want to spend a lot of money and then get sick or injured. In the meantime, though, most of these companies develop their own medical departments. So we were a little bit on the leading edge, but nobody really hired us. They have their own internal companies, but my interest is still really in there. So I would love to go to space, but that really requires a huge financial investment, right?
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful like background though to start something so incredible, and then from shifting, like you said, from this very square like career
Right.
into what you're doing now, which definitely does not have the same borders.
Doesn't have the same borders, but to me, the continuity is interest in human health, right? Whether it's taking care of chronic diseases or acute diseases, which you frequently find in the emergency room. It's a continuum. We are biological creatures, and we're part of an ecosystem, and we're always trying to stretch our boundaries. And, it's all part of, wellness and trying to stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like when people hear that aerospace medicine to now creating this tincture, when I first saw that, I was like, that's amazing. But I always say how we're multifaceted humans. We continue to learn, but they are kind of on the same realm of human health. So what I'm kind of hearing also is you stumbled upon this medicinal herb and
Yes.
ran with it because it
Right.
spiked your interest.
Right. So it's like so many things in life, if it's the right thing at the right time with the right people, it kind of just develops, and it has its own momentum. And that's exactly what happened. I had no idea 15 years ago when this idea popped into my head to see if we can actually grow this in Alaska, that by, 15 years later, the previous resource for botanical companies of rhodiola, which is has been wild harvest. Literally, the villagers in the mountains of Russia and Siberia and China, they would literally go up in the mountains with their shovels and pitchforks and dig up these plants, and you kill the plant because it's the root that you use. I, 15 years ago, would never have dreamed that this plant and this source of botanical material for companies would become endangered. And it's now on an international endangered species list, which now makes it cultivated rhodiola being the only viable source for these botanical companies. 15 years ago, I had no idea that this would happen, right? So now cultivated rhodiola is really the only way that companies are going to be able to get this material. And we're already, developing those processes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It was sort of like, here I am in a cabin in the middle of the winter catching up on my science news, and this article pops up. And as I grew up in South Dakota around farmers, so I always had this idea about how do we help farmers, because farmers help us. And I thought, well, gee, I wonder if we can grow this in Alaskan farms. And then, it likes it. And then all of these things just kind of came, together. I'm not saying it didn't happen with no hard work. It was very hard work, a lot of work and attention to detail, but it just moved and flowed in the right direction.
Yeah, you had an idea, you had faith, and you ran with it, and it's had a beautiful outcome so far. So are you actually one of the only companies that grows it the way that you do, or are there others now? Because you said it was wild harvest.
We're not growing
Yeah.
it. We are working with the farmers. I'm
Okay.
educating the farmers. I help them find out how to grow it. I've been involved in a series of USDA grants where I've been working on various research plots to look at best cultivation practices, for example, because there's no playbook.
Yeah.
There's no, like, if you're a new corn farmer in Iowa, you can call up a neighbor and find out how to grow corn, right? But that doesn't exist in rhodiola. So there were a lot of questions of not only how to grow it, because it's really pretty easy to grow, but how to grow it to be economically viable for a farmer. Where these plants spend their lives, their niche, their habitats are at very inhospitable areas up high in the mountains, in subarctic and alpine areas of the northern hemisphere, and they eke out an existence. They literally grow where other plants cannot, but they don't grow very big. As a matter of, and they don't grow very fast. And as a matter of fact, those plants that are large enough to be harvested in the wild, they're frequently decades old, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, because you're not going to dig up a plant that's too small to be economically viable. So you're going to dig up a big plant. And in those areas, it takes decades for those plants to reach viability for economic purposes. And so now when you bring this plant down to slightly more mild conditions where humans live and farm, they'll grow faster, and you can get them to harvest size within about 5 years. But it still requires, knowing the secret sauce, the slight fertilization, how much weeding, what other things that you need to do. And this is part of these research grants that I've been working on to help the farmers. So the answer to your question is we're not growing it. I'm basically, I've become their buyer, but I'm basically helping the farmers to know how to cultivate it and point them to resources for getting seeds and seedlings. And also, we developed a root processing facility where the farmers can deliver the roots if they don't want to process them themselves. So we basically support the farmers in those endeavors.
I grew up with an ag background, so I have some ag questions for you in regards to this because this is really fascinating to me. And so when you looked at like the process of elimination, when it came to the growing practices, did you guys start out in greenhouses?
No.
And then, but it was just...
This is you've got a really good question going.
Yeah.
The way I first started is in Canada and Alberta, they'd already been doing this a few years before I came up with the idea. And there's an organization there called ARGO, ARRGO, Alberta Rhodiola Rosea Growers Organization. You can only say that once or twice a day. I went to visit them, and I was just amazed that they had come up with this idea. And I befriended their horticulture scientist, and we worked out a little deal where he gave me a handful of seeds and some basic instructions. But I couldn't take their cultivating techniques and transfer them to Alaskan techniques because their soils are better. They didn't need to fertilize, if so, or very little. They just have different conditions, and we do. We have very nutrient-poor soils and very little organic material in our soils. So it took a lot of kind of learning and working with farmers and their observations and some of my research to figure out how to do it that worked for us. But with this little handful of seeds that they gave me, mind you, these seeds are tiny. You can fit 5,000 seeds into a gram. I mean, they're very, very little. They're like carrot seeds or mustard seeds. They're a real pain to deal with. But with that little handful of seeds, I put out 100,000 seedlings in my front yard for over a period of 2 years. My neighbors were very worried because they didn't know what was going on, the seas of trays.
Like, what are you growing over there?
Yeah, it's legal. And so they, then I had a problem. I had 100,000 plants, and what do I do with those? So I started running around to various ag meetings and elbowing my way in, and can I give a presentation on this plant? And slowly, farmers started, a few intrepid farmers came along and decided to try it out, and now we're slowly building more and more acreage.
Wow. How many, so in regards to, I know that you support the farmers who are growing this. So from where it was, how many acres do you guys have now?
Yeah, that's a sore point for me because we need more acreage.
Yeah.
I estimate we probably only have about 15 or 20 acres in production at this point. Some of these farmers are very small. They'll only do a half an acre at a time simply because it's still unknown, right?
Yep.
So you have one grower who's trying it and then realizing, man, it takes 5 years before I know if I'm going to make money, and the next farmer is waiting to see what happens, right?
Yep.
Because it's hard to jump into something that's this labor intensive without knowing. But the beauty is the price of rhodiola raw material has just skyrocketed for 2 reasons, and it's a supply and demand thing, right? The demand has increased when people have started learning about the health benefits of rhodiola. But the fact that it's now considered an endangered species, the supply for botanical companies has just really diminished. And if I may digress a moment, I had an aha moment a few years ago. At that time, I was acting as a broker for the growers. I was connecting them to botanical companies of the appropriate size. Because most companies I get calls from, you have like 10 metric tons of dried rhodiola. 10 metric tons? Are you kidding? No, we maybe have 500 pounds. But the big botanical companies, they can't get their hands on this material right now. So I would connect the growers with a botanical company that met their size. And the first couple of years, it was we were selling it for about $20 a pound, which was already twice as high as Chinese poor quality rhodiola, but they knew what they were getting. And one day I was bagging up, like 400 or 500 pounds of dried root. The farmer was happy. He got, a check for 10 grand. And when I penciled out the retail value of that in terms of capsules that they were making, was about $1 million. And I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. This is crazy. We need to keep that money in Alaska, right? We need to develop an industry where our people are making, getting jobs on manufacturing and packaging and marketing this, rather than doing what we always do in Alaska, which is extract and ship.
Yep.
So I took it upon myself to then try to develop a formula. I literally turned my living room into a, formulation research facility. I had a 30-ton hydraulic press in my living room. I had all kinds of filtration equipment. I had a rotovap distillation equipment. I mean, if you came over for dinner, there was no place to sit, right? Because I had all this gear. But after a couple of years, I got my formula down of the tincture, and now we've scaled up our manufacturing and moved that out of my house.
Wow.
So, it's been a long pathway, but the whole idea of this was to develop this industry in Alaska and keep it here.
That's absolutely incredible. And it seems, just the way you went about it too, it seems like you went about it with a really nice mindset in order to help everybody who's involved. Also, the fact you want to keep it in Alaska, you're using good manufacturing methods to also sustainable, economically friendly way. That's just amazing. And it seems like you've gone to great lengths in order to get this plant. So how about you share with us what's so amazing about it? What are the health benefits of it? Why do you love it so much? Yes.
Well, when I talk about it, it feels like I'm just describing snake oil. Whatever you've got, it's good for you. So traditionally, from a traditional medicine perspective, indigenous northerners used it originally primarily for its ability to improve mental focus and physical stamina. So it was used mostly by athletes and warriors. It was actually considered a Viking warrior secret. And so over time, especially in the Soviet Union, where they really do a lot of research in botanical products, they also discovered its adaptogenic effects. So adaptogens are chemicals that don't have a specific effect, like you would take a blood pressure medicine and it does a certain thing and lowers your blood pressure, right? Adaptogens don't do that. Adaptogens are more general health supportive in that they help normalize, rebalance strengthen normal biochemical pathways that are failing or in trouble or out of balance because of stress or disease or illness. And so I get a lot of different responses. You know, some people tell me, well, it doesn't do anything for me. And my point to them is, well, then you don't need it, right?
Yeah.
But it's useful for improving mood. It's helpful in depression and anxiety management. It helps with ADD, ADHD. It helps with immune system modulation. So it's kind of like, you know, snake oil, whatever is wrong might help you with. And the beautiful thing about rhodiola is that it's non-toxic.
Yeah.
Now, have people had adverse reactions? Yes. Like anything else, there are some people who are super sensitive for whatever reason. But I can tell you, we are probably filling our 65,000th order from our online store in the past 2 years. And I've only had 3 people call me and tell them it made them super anxious.
Oh, wow.
They're just unusually sensitive. So that's pretty good. That's, you know, pretty good rate.
Yeah.
There's also a concern. There are certain type of mental health issues that maybe you need to be careful with rhodiola, particularly bipolar 2.
Yep.
If you have a tendency to have manic phases, it's not recommended to take rhodiola because the stimulating effects could increase or induce or worsen the manic phase. Although I've had a couple of people who have bipolar 1, which is the depression only, who tell me they feel very well on it. And then also, if you're on certain medications, like the standard SSRI antidepressant medications, you really should be speaking with your physician because you may be able to adjust your dosage down. But we don't want people just to add this in and then without telling their provider that it really needs to be, you know, a conscious effort to work together. And certain antipsychotic medications, I'd be a little bit reluctant to recommend that, to take rhodiola without really careful observation and support from your physician because there could be some interactions that we just don't know about yet.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question, which I'm super fascinated about. I definitely believe in like integrated medicine where like just speak with your doctor, be completely transparent. But I also do like bringing natural supplements in if it can take away a synthetic chemical we're putting into our bodies. Have you seen any examples of somebody starts taking your tincture and then they can slowly taper off some other medicines? Yes. Okay. Do you mind sharing a few of those with us?
Well, remember, I'm not in clinical mental health practice. It's all feedback from people. And I do work with a couple of psychologists and psychiatrists who use botanical medicines, and they've told me that some of their patients have been able to get off of their SSRIs, for example. But again, that needs to be done in a coordinated approach.
Yep.
I would never say to somebody, you know, stop your Prozac, take rhodiola instead.
Yep.
That's really bad advice.
That's dangerous, yeah.
Don't cold turkey your SSRIs.
Right.
No, please do not do that.
Right.
But I love how you can kind of incorporate something else in. I feel like oftentimes people feel stuck or they feel trapped by current medications that they're on. And I just love how this is another option to potentially give people hope that it's serving its purpose now, but you try this and see what happens. On that note too, how do you suggest going about taking it then? Is there a certain dose people should take? Do you suggest increasing the dose as time goes? Is this something you stay on kind of forever, or does your body kind of adapt and get used to it and you could eventually also stop taking the plant as well?
All of the above.
Okay. I know there's a lot.
It's all individualistic, you know. If a person's never taken rhodiola before, I tell them to start out with a very small dose. And also to be sure you know the source of the rhodiola. And that's one of the reasons, you know, I'm so focused on this product. Because if you go to the store shelf and you look at all these rhodiola products, I bet you if you had them tested, many of them you wouldn't even find the ingredients. The marker ingredient is called rosavins, and some of them aren't even Rhodiola rosea. There are, depending on your approach to the taxonomy of rhodiola, there are around 100 different rhodiola species, and they kind of look alike.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these companies, they'll just say rhodiola on there. And if it's from China, it's probably not even Rhodiola rosea, Crenulata, or some of the others. But back to your question of how to take it. Start out with a small dose and work your way up. Because in some people, the stimulating effects of rhodiola can be intense, and you don't want them to get jittery. So you start out with a low dose. You can work your way up over a course of a few days. You can even take another dose in the early afternoon if you want. See how that works. But avoid it late in the day or in the evening because it can keep you awake. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we know it crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's how it has its anti-depression and mood enhancement effects. Many people, myself included, who start taking rhodiola may experience more vivid dreams for the first several nights. Yep. And so you know something's going on.
Yeah. Can you actually elaborate for some of our viewers who may not know what the blood-brain barrier is?
Oh, well, the blood-brain barrier is a protective. We don't know exactly how it is done on a cellular basis, but it's a protective layer to protect the brain from toxins. So you don't want this stuff that's bad for your body in your brain as well. And so a lot of drugs don't pass through the blood-brain barrier on purpose.
Yep.
But
Amazing.
Would you say then, since yours is non-toxic, that's why it's able to pass through the blood-brain barrier?
I don't think I would put it that way.
Yeah.
I think it's effective because it crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah. So besides just completely then, I mean, obviously everyone just go buy their product instead of putting yourself through the which one should I pick. But what can people look out for when looking to buy this type of plant medicine?
Well, in general, for any botanical, in this country, botanical, dietary, and herbal supplements are not regulated, right? The only regulation is that the FDA requires that what's on the label is true. But nobody runs around from the federal government testing this stuff to make sure what's in the bottle is actually what is being advertised. So you have to trust your brand. And then when you want to trust your brand, how do you know really where it came from?
Yeah.
I would recommend anybody who's interested in this topic to get a book called The Business of Botanicals by Anne Ombrecht. She wrote an incredibly interesting book on how do you know as a consumer where it came from.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest
ethically
things.
sourced.
Yeah. As
you're standing there in the grocery line, well, let's see, do I take this one or this one? You just don't know the source, not just the cleanliness and the purity, but the ethics of that sourcing, because you don't want to keep, destroying plants and driving them to extinction. So that's why we're really proud of our brand, because we know exactly where it came from. I know each farmer.
Yeah.
We make sure that we test it prior to harvest to make sure it's ready. We test it after harvest to make sure that what we're putting in our product is meets those minimum requirements of concentration of ingredients and cleanliness, and we make sure it's not contaminated with any bacteria or molds or mildew or yeast, and heavy metals. We don't test for pesticides because our farmers don't use pesticides at all. So that's how we know that our product is, pure and the best you can get.
Yeah. I think that's always just been the frustrating part for me, is because most of the time people who go to the grocery store looking for these types of products, they're looking for this product because they want to better themselves.
Yeah.
They don't want to put toxic pesticide-filled stuff into their body, but then you look at the label and you're overwhelmed because you're just like, what does this all even mean?
Right.
So the fact when you can actually find a trusted brand and you know what you're getting is quality, that to me is the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I know in this country there's a big movement to do better, to know your grower, to know your sourcing.
Yep.
But again, there's no overall kind of credentialing program to show that. If you go look in apothecaries in Germany and you pick something off the shelf, you know exactly what's in there.
Yeah.
Right? Because they do that. They do the testing. But in this country, it's still a little bit of the wild, wild west. So you have to know your brand.
Yeah, completely. Do you have any questions regarding that before we move on to like the what's next question?
Yeah. So I know that we talked a little bit about a lot of the positives of putting a lot of this out there in the world. And then also too, is that like, what are some of the biggest challenges you are currently facing getting this product out into the world?
The biggest challenge is we don't have enough growers yet.
Okay.
That's my next big push. I mean, I can sell all the rhodiola products that we can get our hands on because people love it. But we're limited in the source. Right now, we have just enough growers to provide enough material for us to make enough tincture that'll last a year, but it's still in our year marketing campaign. But we're never going to get into Trader Vic's or Trader Joe's or Whole Foods unless we have more growers.
Yeah.
So that's our biggest challenge right now. The other challenge is developing other products. A lot of people don't want tincture because it's made with alcohol.
Yep.
Right? In order to extract materials, botanical materials, out of a plant, some of these materials are water soluble. That's why herbal teas work, right? But some of these materials, these chemicals, are not very water soluble, and you need an organic solvent. And the easiest organic solvent to use is food grade ethanol. And you use a combination of water and ethanol to extract as much of the full spectrum of the plant as you possibly can. So you have this wonderful material, but it doesn't taste good. And a lot of people, for whatever reasons, don't want any ethanol in their bodies. So we're missing those people. And so the next step we're doing is we're, as we speak, building an extraction facility to take this tincture and distill off the ethanol, distill off most of the water, and then get the rest of the water out either with a spray dryer technique or a freeze drying technique. We're still working out those details, but we're trying to get down to a dry powdered extract so we can know what each batch is, the amount of ingredients it contains, so we can start building up a capsule in a standardized dose.
Amazing.
And in that way, you can reach a lot more people, and clinicians then have a lot more confidence because they know what the dosage is. So they can advise their patients, start out with a 50 milligram dose and work your way up versus how many squirts of this do I put in my tea this morning, right? And so it kind of shifts it a little bit from tincture, which is wonderful, but it's kind of still a little bit of hippie medicine, right, to more of a standardized clinical formula. And then with a dry powdered extract, you can also make other products. You can do it for sports supplements. And the area I'm really interested in exploring is skincare.
Oh.
So rhodiola is used in the Soviet Union or in Russia very heavily in women over 40 because it has anti-aging and anti-wrinkling effects and wound healing effects. And so we would love to, get into that market. But again, that goes back to problem number one, needing more growers, needing more farmland.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a slow process to build this up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I was gonna say, putting in like the beauty market. As much as I want to say everyone cares about their health, a lot of people are like, "Give me something anti-aging." What?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that's beautiful how you want to expand and grow like that. And also, I know you were talking about putting them in capsules to making it just more. Exactly what's in there versus the droplet. Do you still work in a typical like clinic setting when it comes to your MD?
So my day job as a
Yes.
physician is just in aviation medicine. I don't
Okay.
take care of sick people
Okay.
anymore. Basically, I do medical exams for pilots for their
Okay.
FAA medical certification.
I was going to say, would you, if you were, or do you recommend this to like some of your patients that come in, or have you seen other doctors in clinic settings offering this to patients?
Yeah, some of the psychiatrists and psychologists in town, and
Okay.
a lot of the naturopaths in town, are really interested because, kind of funny. A naturopath once told me that when she went to school, she was told rhodiola is an incredible herb.
Really?
It's so beneficial, but really don't recommend it very often because it's so rare and it's being threatened to extinction. And so it probably hasn't been used as much by clinicians as it possibly could, simply because of that idea, just save it for really, really bad cases.
Yeah, because the access to it.
I have feedback from various physicians who tell me this, but again, I don't really work in a clinical medical practice anymore, but I do. Many of my pilots take it because they're exhausted, they're stressed,
Yep.
and they work the backside of the clock all the time. They're on circadian disrupting cycles. And they tell me that it helps them. And some of them also, when they're like studying for their upgrades or they have to go into a new airplane and learn the whole new systems, rhodiola helps them with the focus. So in that setting, I do use it. But again, in my current practice, it's not a clinical diagnostic treatment practice.
Yeah, but I just love how other physicians are, especially around your area, are open to using it. Because as much as I would love for our communities to kind of gain more knowledge themselves, or like go out looking for information versus just trusting everything they hear through like the internet or even through their doctors. Like I wish people took their own medical and physical health into their own hands. People will argue, I don't have time. It's hard to find trusted, reliable sources. So if we can kind of get this with physicians, so people go to their doctors, because people trust their doctors for the most part. If we can get other doctors to kind of recommend this, I feel like that just kind of cuts out the fat in a way. People don't have to go looking for it, doing all this research. A lot of people trust their doctors. If more doctors are opening to mentioning this to their patients, I just feel like that could be game changing.
Well, it can be game changing. There's a lot of resistance, of course, in the traditional medical community, simply because we don't get this kind of training, right? We kind of like compartmentalize, or here's an herbalist, and here's a cardiologist, and here's a gynecologist. We don't really, we live in this sort of compartmentalized world.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's also really difficult to know everything.
It is.
And the trust, and the trust is, patients do trust their physicians for the most part, but there is also this anti-establishment movement. I wouldn't go to a Western doctor. I don't trust big pharma, when there is so much science and research that tells you statins lower your cholesterol, your bad cholesterol levels, and you're less likely to have a heart attack. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So in my world, I try to explain to people it's not one or the other.
It's both.
It's
my
both.
Opinion, yeah.
It's both. But you also have to understand that in herbal medicine and botanical medicine, it's really difficult to do well-designed, scientific, double-blind clinical trials. If you make a chemical in the lab, let's say, a blood pressure medicine, every time you take that chemical, it's the same, right? It comes from a lab, it's got a formula, and you can use this and do a double-blind study for effect. But if you take plant material and grind it up, it's not a standardized sample.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really difficult to do those kinds of studies in the world of botanical medicine. And that's where a lot of testimonials come in, and my grandmother used this, and it kind of gets muddy and mixed up regarding good data to tell you, what's effective and what's safe.
Yeah. Well, I'm just excited too that we are starting to explore it more, because any type of medicine, regardless if it is a pharmaceutical or a plant medicine, at one point somebody had to start researching it, right? Like we had to start collecting data. So that's why I get super excited when I find products like yours, because you're doing the research, you're finding out how it can help people. And yes, nothing is always like perfect or one set way to fix all. But the more research we get and the more we start making things readily available, and it makes me hopeful, like new innovations in medicine.
Right. And there are ways of doing this from the ground up. For example, I mentioned earlier today Dr. Mahtab Jafari at the University of California, Irvine, who is a pharmacy professor there. She has an anti-aging lab. She uses primarily fruit flies, Drosophila melanogaster, to determine effects of various botanicals. And she looks specifically for what's called increasing health span. Health span is not just living longer, but living healthy longer. And after many years of trying various drugs and botanicals, she discovered that Rhodiola rosea increases the healthy lifespan of the fruit fly by 25%. And so people will ask, well, why would I want my fruit flies to live longer? Well, no, we share a lot of genes with them, right?
Really?
We share a lot of disease genes with fruit flies. And so it's a really great way to kind of get an indication that something is going on here. Yeah. And she's taken some of this other research in rhodiola also to mouse models, and has found that there's positive effects using rhodiola in carbohydrate metabolism, and therefore might be helpful in diabetes management. So a lot of animal studies can give you directions. Yeah. But again, she needs to make sure that the source of her rhodiola is good, because it can be very variable, and you want to maintain the same kind of sample integrity as you go through your studies.
Yeah. I keep saying that's incredible. I just love this stuff. But so besides the capsules and hopefully gaining more land and access to resources to start producing this on a more massive level, what else do you have planned for Alaska Rhodiola?
Oh, gosh.
Where do you want to go?
Well,
what's the biggest dreams?
I would really like our product to make I'll tell you my 3 goals. Maybe this is a good time for that. First goal is to put money into the pockets of Alaskan farmers, right? That is really important to me, because farmers struggle really a lot growing food in a state where, the conditions are very harsh. So they spend a lot of money in greenhouses and tunnels and things like that to extend the growing season. And here's a plant that they can actually take advantage of our harsh conditions to grow it naturally. Yeah. So if we can put money into the pockets of farmers, they may be inclined to grow more food, right? We have a lot of food insecurity in Alaska. If the transportation industry shut down for some reason, earthquake, natural disaster, September 11th, whatever, our store shelves would be empty within a week. Okay, so we need more food that we grow. So by putting money into the pockets of farmers, by giving them a high quality, economically viable plant, is goal number 1. Goal number 2, especially with protecting the species from extinction, we'd like to produce the highest quality cultivated rhodiola on the planet, and we're learning how to do that. And number 3, I'd like to build an entire industry in Alaska based on this plant, like what I learned. Don't ship it out, and have all these other people, taking our product and running with it. So I'd like to build a whole vertically integrated industry from the farm field all the way to the store shelf. And in the meantime, I'd like to make a little money eventually on the side too, which 15 years of hard work, Yeah. But that's my plan. And I think, I hate to say this, but I think the world would be a better place if we had a little more rhodiola out there for people.
Talking to you is just so inspiring, because not only are you doing this, but you're doing this at an older age.
I know. I'm 71 years old. You know, I keep hoping
look
the
great.
anti-aging
Rodeo.
effects.
Yeah, but you look incredible. And I mean, and you're so smart and so quick-witted. And so I just want to know, like, what keeps you inspired to keep creating at this, at this stage in your life?
I would just say it's my personality. I mean, you know, I'm not the kind of person who would say, "Oh, I'm retired now. I'm going to go play golf."
Yeah.
What keeps me going is just going, you know, coming up with something new. Rhodiola has just really kind of been a wonderful opportunity for me to develop something I think it has real potential for people and is fun, and every day is sort of a learning effort, because I learn something new about rhodiola almost every day. And I get to meet people like you.
Yeah. And we're so
we're so grateful that you're here and you're doing this. And one thing that I just noticed is you are very light-spirited and you're very sweet. And I think just like how you said, this stumbled upon you one day and you decided to run with it. I feel like just your curiosity is probably what keeps you so young and joyful and like continuing to do the things that spark your interest, is because you just follow your heart on where anything is guiding you, is what I'm kind of getting.
Well, it's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's all about living in your community, taking care of your kids. I have 2 wonderful kids and a lovely granddaughter and one on the way. And so it's all about that, you know. But it's really nice to get calls from people that you least expect thanking you, you know, for having helped them. And that's what keeps me going too.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is we're like, we just want to help people. If we help one person, we always say it, that's all that really matters. So.
What a beautiful time. Then thank you so much for
Well,
thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's lovely to meet you and have this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, once again, thank you for being here. And then kind of to wrap things up, what we always do, if you give any advice to our viewers, it could be related to your business, related to medicine, not related.
Oh, right.
What would you say?
Don't give up. I would say if you have an idea and it seems right, of course, you know, I've had other ideas where you thought, oh, this is a great idea. And then you run into a brick wall and you want to force your way through that brick wall because you have this idea and you're going to, darn it, you're going to do it. But you need to know when that brick wall really does mean something, and it means it's not the right time or the right place. But if you do find something that really grabs your heart and it flows, don't give up. Just keep going. That's what I would say.
That's great. I completely agree with you. So for like the bajillionth time, thank you so much for being here, honestly.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, it's been great.
Thank you for inviting me.
And until next time, I love you.
Thank you so much, and keep shining your light.